Tyson Fury has issued a challenge to his promoters, Frank Warren and Bob Arum, saying that he'd like to fight 15 to 20 times next year. He says people used to fight 30 times a year back in the days. Now, in terms of 30 times a year, you'd have to go back a very, very long way indeed to find people who fought that often, certainly at championship level. And as far as Tyson Fury fighting 15 to 20 fights next year, I don't know how serious he was because, Tyson Fury jokes around a lot, talks a lot of nonsense, exaggerates a lot. But do I believe he wants to be more active? Probably. 15 to 20 fights a year is just not feasible because you have to factor in injuries. And obviously, if he's going to fight 15 to 20 times a year, most of those fights would be against lower tier opposition. Most of those fights would not be WBC sanctioned bouts. And I've spoken in many videos over the years about the fact that back in the 90s and the 80s, a lot of world champions used to have these non-title bouts in between title defenses. And so they would rack up a lot of fights. But in this day and age, for Tyson Fury to fight that often, he would have to take a big pay cut. Would he be willing to do that? He'd have to fight a lot of the fights in small venues. You see, this kind of thing worked fairly well for certain champions in the United States back in the days because the United States is a much bigger country than the UK. There were areas of the United States where people, fans of a particular fighter, would never get the chance to see that fighter live because they couldn't travel to Vegas or Atlantic City or New York or wherever, and tickets for the big fights were very expensive. So when the champion came to town and was fighting in a little ballroom or some smaller venue and the tickets were much cheaper for a non-title bout, that gave them an opportunity which they wouldn't normally get. But as I say, with the UK, much smaller country than that, I have to imagine that the vast majority of people who would want to attend the Tyson Fury fight have probably already done so by now. And there's also the possibility that if you were to fight that often, the fans might start to get a little bored and it might negatively impact the ticket sales for your bigger fights. Let's say you do, 10 fights a year, 12 fights a year. Let's say you're fighting one a month, right? 2 or 3 of them are title defenses and the other 7 or 8 are fights against journeymen or whoever. Are the people who get the chance to see you in one of your little fights, in one of your less significant fights, are they also going to go to your major fight? Do you know what I mean? Again, it all depends on the ticket prices. Are you going to be fighting virtually for free? You see what I'm saying? Obviously, there are benefits to fighting often. Amateurs, of course, tend to fight very often. Mike Tyson, when he first became champion, fought often, particularly for somebody at that level, the championship level. I think he might have had 4 or 5 fights in a year when he first became champion. So he was fighting often, Mike Tyson, and he was lamenting the fact later on in his career that he wasn't fighting as often as he was when he first became world champion. And he blamed that for not getting back to that same type of form. Maybe Tyson Fury also feels like to be at his absolute best, he needs to be active, fighting all the time. And there's also the fact that outside of boxing, perhaps he gets bored, doesn't know what to do with himself, and feels happiest when he's actually training for a fight, fighting, and then moving on to the next one, etc., etc. But yeah, as far as what Tyson Fury said specifically about Arum and Warren getting him out 15 to 20 times a year, not going to happen. If he's going to fight, let's say more often, or an unusually high number of times, then he needs to try and get back into the United States, I think, because there, at least it's a bigger country, there are more local markets that they could try to tap into. In the UK, I just don't see how it would be financially viable. I know Fury claims to be the man of the people and all that, but in all reality, he likes a pound note just as much as the next man. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that Tyson Fury isn't honest about it. But hypothetically, if he could fight a lot more often, let's say 5, 6, 7 times a year, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see if he's got a level above what we've seen from him so far. As in, if he can be even better than the Tyson Fury we've seen up to this point. And perhaps fighting more often would allow him to do that. So yeah, that'd be great if they can do it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below.